Ever get that feeling, like when you're somewhere really vibrant?
Yeah.
Like, picture this, right? You're in the middle of a bustling market in India.
Okay, I'm with you.
Smells of spices everywhere, those bright, beautiful silks catching your eye.
Sounds amazing.
And then you stumble upon a stall just overflowing with beauty products, creams, oils, all promising to, make you radiant and all that.
The classic allure of beauty products, right?
Exactly. And being someone who likes to, do their research, you'd kind of assume those products have some basic safety standards, like they've been checked out.
It's a reasonable assumption.
Mhm.
We put a lot of trust in the things we use every day.
But, and here's the kicker, what if I told you a good chunk of those products had something in them? Something that's already raising eyebrows in, say, Europe.
Hmm, that's where things get interesting and a little unsettling.
Right. It makes you wonder what's really lurking in those pretty bottles. And that's what we're diving into today, this whole idea of hidden ingredients, unexpected stuff, in the things we might use daily.
It's a bit of a wake-up call, honestly. This recent study out of India, it really made me rethink some things.
I bet. Tell me more about it.
So scientists at the National Environmental Engineering Research Institute, NEERI, they did this deep dive into 174 beauty and personal care products, just everyday stuff from baby lotion to hairspray, you name it.
A pretty decent sample size, so what did they find?
Well, they found a surprisingly high amount of these chemicals called siloxanes, specifically D5 and D6. And the levels, let's just say they weren't insignificant.
Okay, backing up for a sec. Siloxanes, for those of us who haven't encountered the term before, what exactly are they, and why are they ending up in our lotions and potions anyway?
So siloxanes, think of them like these compounds made up of silicon, oxygen, and carbon. Kind of a mouthful. But the important part is how they act in beauty products. They give that smooth, silky feel that so many people love.
Ah, so they're the reason that moisturizer glides on so nicely.
Exactly. They also help things spread easily and dry quickly, which is why you find them in things like deodorants and hairsprays too.
Makes sense. But back to this NEERI study. You said the levels they found were kind of alarming, especially compared to somewhere like the EU. What were the actual numbers?
Yeah, it was pretty stark. 40%, a full 40% of the products they tested had siloxanes exceeding the EU safety limit. And that limit is just 0.1% for context.
Wow, that's a significant chunk. Were there any, extreme cases?
Oh yeah, definitely. One product had 100 times the EU limit, and another, get this, was a whopping 760 times higher.
760, that's just wild. And you mentioned they specifically looked at these cyclic siloxanes, D5 and D6. What makes them so different?
Well, D5, which is cyclopentasiloxane, and D6, cyclohexasiloxane, they're the ones you find most often because of those properties we talked about, the smooth texture, easy spreadability. And in the study, D5 levels were above 10% in over a third of the samples. For D6, it was over 20%. There was even one product that was a crazy 76% D5 by weight.
Okay, so clearly the EU is taking this 0.1% limit seriously. What's the reasoning behind it? Like, why is the EU regulating these siloxanes so tightly in cosmetics?
Well, it's a precaution, really. There have been a number of studies, mostly on animals, that suggest a link between siloxane exposure and potential problems with the lungs, the liver, and even the reproductive system.
So not exactly things you want to be messing around with.
Right. It's not definitive proof of harm to humans, but it's enough for the EU to say, hey, let's play it safe. On top of that, they've classified D4, D5, and D6 as substances of very high concern. That's because they stick around in the environment and can build up in living things over time.
That's definitely concerning. So with the EU being so cautious, where does India stand on this? Do they have similar regulations for siloxanes in cosmetics?
Here's the thing, and it's a big thing. India doesn't currently have specific regulations limiting siloxanes in these products. So it's a very different landscape compared to the EU, which has taken a much more proactive approach.
That's a pretty stark contrast. And it brings up another issue that really jumped out at me from the NEERI study. It wasn't just the high levels, but also the lack of transparency. Like what the manufacturers were actually telling consumers on their labels. What did they find there?
This is where it gets really tricky for consumers. The study found that half of the deodorants they tested, and we're talking 50% here, didn't even list siloxanes as an ingredient.
Wow. But you said they all contain these cyclic siloxanes, right?
Every single one. And makeup, things like primers and lip colors, they often had over 1% siloxanes, way above that EU limit, but no mention on the packaging. Makes you wonder what else isn't being disclosed.
It's almost like a breach of trust, isn't it? You think you're making an informed choice based on the ingredients, but that information might be incomplete.
Exactly. And it's not just this one study in India that's raising these questions about siloxanes. There's a broader scientific context here.
Oh, really?
Well,
What are other researchers finding?
well, studies in places like Poland, South Korea, and the U.S. have also been looking into siloxanes. And they found similar potential problems with the lungs, liver, and even the immune system.
So the evidence is building, and it's not just about what we put on our bodies, is it? There's also the question of where these chemicals go after we're done with them. Like, how do they impact the environment?
You're hitting on a really crucial point. There was a study out of Purdue University in 2022, and it looked at something we don't often think about: airborne exposure.
Airborne exposure, so like breathing it in.
Yes, they found that these siloxanes can actually become airborne when you use certain products like hair care products.
So basically, you're standing in your bathroom, doing your hair, and potentially releasing these things into the air.
Exactly. Their research suggested a normal hair routine could release anywhere from 1 to 17 milligrams of siloxanes into the air. One researcher, Nusrat Young, even called the findings alarming. And I think that's fair.
It's kind of a hidden consequence, right? You don't really think about what's happening in the air around you when you're using these products. But at least there's a potential solution that came out of that Purdue study, right?
Yeah, thankfully there is. It's something a lot of us already have. A bathroom exhaust fan.
Really? That's simple.
It seems so. Another researcher on that study, Jinglin Jiang, found that using an exhaust fan while and after using these products could reduce DeFi levels in the air by over 90%.
So a quick flick of a switch could make a big difference. It's good to know there's something we can do. But going back to those environmental concerns, you mentioned something about the EU being worried about how long these siloxanes stick around. Why is that such a big deal?
It's all about persistence. These siloxanes, they don't break down easily in the environment, so they just kind of hang out, accumulating in the water, the soil, the air. And over time, that buildup can have some pretty serious ecological consequences. It's a long-term problem.
So we have potential health risks, high levels in products, misleading labels, environmental worries. It's a lot to take in. What are the researchers at NEERI suggesting be done about all of this, especially in India?
Well, they're making a pretty strong case for regulation. They want to see India implement rules to control the amount of siloxanes allowed in beauty and personal care products. And they're basing this on their findings, which were published in a well-respected scientific journal, Science of the Total Environment. Plus, the study had backing from the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research in India, so that adds some weight to their recommendations.
It sounds like they've really done their homework. So for our listener out there, someone who's maybe navigating the aisles of a store or even just looking at their own bathroom cabinet, what's the key takeaway from all of this?
It's about awareness, plain and simple. We don't have concrete proof that these levels of siloxanes are causing widespread harm, but the evidence is mounting. There are those high concentrations, the lack of transparency on labels, the environmental persistence. It's all worth paying attention to. The NEERI study gives us some valuable insight into the situation in India, and the Purdue study highlights that we might be exposed in ways we don't even realize. And then there's the EU's approach, which shows us that some parts of the world are taking this very seriously.
It really makes you think about what it means to be a truly informed consumer these days. There are so many products, so many promises, but it's not always easy to get the full picture.
You got it. It's a challenge, finding that balance between wanting effective and affordable products and understanding the potential risks involved, both for ourselves and for the planet. Hopefully, this deep dive will encourage people to really scrutinize those ingredient lists when they're available and think about the bigger picture behind those everyday choices we make. Even something as simple as a beauty product can have a pretty complex story, and it's a story worth knowing.
It's a story we're all a part of, whether we realize it or not.
That's a great way to put it.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of hidden ingredients. It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
It has been, and thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to delve into these important topics.
Until next time, everyone, stay curious, stay informed, and stay beautiful, but maybe with a little more awareness of what's behind that beauty.
Couldn't have said it better myself.